Thinking about all of us getting back together again today sort of brought back these massive memories, so many of them, and the campfire banter, the toilet humour, the Dave, the tarantula.
Absolutely. So after Dave, I think my favourite memory is milking a goat. So it was the first time I ever milked a goat, but it was also really great learning about how Juliet no longer just has the one goat, but has like 9 at the moment and is growing that herd through the work of Farm Africa.
There were so many memorable moments. I wasn't prepared for the cycling at altitude, that was going to be really, really tough. And I thought it would be a bit of light gardening on the farms that we were helping on, wrong on both counts.
Probably the most memorable part of the farming for me was creating the kitchen garden for Judy, I believe it was, wasn't it? Next to us was a very, very large pigsty with some enormous pigs in it, and in what felt like about 40 degrees of heat. And as one of the sort of key ingredients for the kitchen garden was actually the very blue poo that was coming out of the pigs.
It was memorable.
It was very memorable. What about you, Katie?
I think the most memorable part of it for me was when we went to Juliet's farm and how she had to walk 6 kilometres every day to go and fetch food for her goats. And I just found that quite incredible in terms of she's having to do that as well as run a household, run a farm, and also help other people within the Village-Based Advisor programme. And she was just quite a remarkable person. So that whole experience was very humbling and also very eye-opening as to the real challenges that happen over in Kenya. When you're running a farm and you're having to train people and you're having to get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and then go to bed at 9, 10 in the evening, that's a lot of extra work involved in your day.
The most memorable part of the trip for me was meeting Juliet and her taking us through her farm and really showing us all the work that she's been working through with Farm Africa on improving her farming techniques. This has enabled her to produce more food, which is giving her family a better lifestyle, as well as having surplus food to sell in the communities and helping them also improving their farming techniques. This is enabling more and more children to get educated, and the impact that we saw was just so powerful.
It is so important for us to support women in East Africa. They are the backbone of food and farming. 62% of women in Eastern Africa are employed in agriculture, so they're a huge part of the economy. And they only receive a small proportion of financial support and different services that are available.
It just struck me that the women are doing all the farming, but they're also doing everything, aren't they?
Yeah, they're raising the kids. Not only are they feeding their families, they're feeding the local communities, they're supporting the local communities to do the same thing. And as a result of all of this they're now sending their children off to good education.
It's really hard for women in Africa to actually own the land. And sort of traditionally, the men are the people who receive the communications about products, about inputs. And therefore, the work that Farm Africa is doing to empower women through the Village-Based Advisor Scheme and other projects is so important to kind of change the way people think about women in farming in Africa.
The key lesson that I learned from the farmers and Farm Africa's work on this trip was just how important Farm Africa's Village-Based Advisor model is. So that's all about empowering smallholder farmers to share information from their farms and demonstrate it to other farmers of the power of regenerative agriculture, and just seeing that firsthand and how it had such a big ripple effect because it was a trusted source. That really struck me. And I think that's what's unique about what Farm Africa are doing, making sure that they're empowering people on the ground, people that are trusted and will therefore get that information really out there to their community.
I was really shocked by, I don't know why I hadn't appreciated this, but each of these women as village-based advisors is providing outreach to roughly another 200 women farmers. I mean, the networks they've set up, I think in total reaching over 57,000 women farmers, which is amazing. But that's amazing because there's still so many barriers. So we ran a roundtable event, and that roundtable event was amazing. These women had come to Nairobi and were sharing their experiences, but the land ownership that you mentioned, access to finance, the extension services that the men would receive, and the communications, these are all barriers, yet Farm Africa is helping to face into those obstacles and help them to overcome them. and the results speak for themselves. Truly inspiring.
I guess what I was really struck by was I'd expected, with all of our knowledge, farming in England, that I would be able to go out to Embu and help farmers with what I knew. What I very quickly realised was, my goodness, we have so much as farmers here in England to learn from Africa in knowledge exchange, how they're sharing best practice of what they're doing, how they're farming so much more with biology. I was really, really struck by what we had to learn from farming in Africa. And the other takeaway bit was, we're so focused on trees being not food producing trees. Of course, they're trees. They were absolutely focused on, yes, sequestering carbon, but all the ambition for trees was about food producing trees.
Not being from an agriculture background, being able just to see a whole variety of different things that have been implemented, even in terms of the wormery, and utilising that process to then create the kind of byproduct to then put into the soil, but also how a lot of the farmers worked together on it. It wasn't just about one farmer doing something for themselves. It was how there was that sense of community to help everybody, but also kind of share that knowledge.
One of the challenges that all farmers face globally and also in Eastern Africa is climate change. We're seeing increased rainfall, heavy flooding, prolonged periods of drought. We're seeing rising temperatures and all those things which are really posing challenges to farmers.
It was really interesting when we went back to Nairobi to the roundtable event, and there was lots of discussions about the importance of agri-insurance, and having witnessed and heard all the stories from different farmers about the different impacts that they've received. So much hard work goes in, but there is no guarantees, and it really does show the importance of having some kind of insurance system that does help when they are these bad periods and crops yields are lower.
Judy was telling us about how, because of climate change, the weather is so unpredictable, and that the floods will come and wash away all the crops, and then they lose the yield for that season. They lose the income from that. So, and she was saying how, working with Farm Africa and being trained as a village-based advisors, they're all being able to share best practice more, think about companion planting, ways of covering their crops, all kinds of different things to reduce the impact of such weather events.
She passionately spoke about her farm and her crops, and she's creating this food system that is growing really great crops, and at the same time she's able to work with the environment that she's got around her, the trees, the soil.
We went to one farm as well, and they'd adopted mulching practices, and that was specifically to keep more moisture in the soil, because the rains, they're just not quite sure when they're going to come. That really hit me. And alongside that, when the rains did come, often they would be a lot stronger, because it's getting a lot more volatile now than they anticipated. So it was a case of using mulch to help trap the moisture in for when it was maybe unexpectedly dry. But then they'd also planted different things to help prevent soil erosion for when those rains really came as well. And it was really struck me, the fact that they had to prepare for those two extremes, but that through the techniques that Farm Africa have been sharing, they could prepare.
Regenerative farming, with what we saw over in Kenya, is more than just putting crops in the ground, is more than just feeding animals. It becomes a different way of growing food that is going to be much more resilient to cope with how our climate is changing. And when we can incorporate this tapestry of micro activities, it creates a richness, and that's what then makes it really beautiful, and you get fantastic nourishing food at the end of it.
I'd probably say that regenerative agriculture means actually back to basics. With the sort of it seems so straightforward, and you look at the yield that they get from their crops now from adopting what is basically very simple best practice. It's phenomenal.
I was quite struck by how regenerative agriculture has multiple different impacts. So not only is it making the soil better, the yields higher, but then it's having that financial impact on the families that are doing it, and there's a social impact as they're sharing and teaching one another how to do it better. But things like the climate impact, in that they're no longer burning all their waste because they're using it to compost to make the crops better. So it was kind of one relatively simple change in practice as having impact in loads of different areas.
Regenerative agriculture can be quite simple. It is simple, but the impacts really are huge. They've improved their incomes, they've helped the environment, and it's just led to a better lifestyle.